Hi, welcome to my YouTube channel. My name's Fiona Wong. I am a human design person and I run the website thewowpixel.com. So what you see on the screen is Nas X's chart. Today, Nas X came out with his new single, J Christ, and I was like, I gotta update his chart. I've done his chart before, but this is a more updated version. So the first thing is that we're dealing with a generator here. All generators have this enveloping aura that pulls straight to the sacral center. Sacral center is the reproductive organs, genitals. I also consider the womb part of the sacral center as well. The sacral center's enveloping aura, if you look at this thing on my screen, you see all of these arrows dumping straight into the sacral center. So that is the generator aura. They have a million arms coming out from all directions, well, more of the sacral direction. And what happens is it grabs all of these things, all of the stimuli, and dumps it on the sacral center so that the sacral center can respond to it. So that's what makes generators generators, that whole aspect. This is what makes your strategy just yoink, 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 dump. Yeah, no, maybe, who knows? So if you are a generator type, if you're a manifesting generator or you're a classic generator, an exercise you can do at home is take your dominant hand and place it over your sacral center. And next time you do something like, if you're going on DoorDash and you're like, I don't know what to eat today, or I don't know what flavor yogurt I want when I open the fridge, then what you should do is put your hand over the sacral center and run each one through your sacral center. I is just say like, okay, do I want the strawberry yogurt? You know, it dumps into your sacral center and then your sacral responds, no. However, your sacral center responds to you. And you do that with each one. And that's how the sacral center actually gets answers. It's not this like open-ended dialogue. It can be if you're a manifesting generator, but we'll talk about that another time. But that's what's happening here. So I wanted you to know that so we have this basis, this foundation of what we're looking at when we're talking about generators. So let's talk about his emotional authority. If you know anything about human design or you are an emotional authority, you've probably heard that saying like, just ride the wave, na 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 na. What does that mean? But when we talk about riding the wave, we do have to get a little bit specific. And you'll see on this screen, it says channel of synthesis, pointing down to that channel over there. That channel is what makes Nas X an emotional authority, which is why this channel is so different. And not every emotional authority experiences it. And I'm not talking about like, oh, everybody experiences their authority a different way. There are different types of waves when it comes to emotional authorities. And today I am going to talk about the channel of synthesis just because this is what Nas X has. So we know that emotional authorities, they're riding the wave. Something's going on, they're riding this wave and they're waiting for that wave to give them some sort of information. So channel of synthesis, just humor me for a second and imagine this pot of water. We're going to put it on the stove and what happens? These little bubbles start forming at the bottom, right? And then like it starts boiling a little bit, all of these bubbles are starting to come to the pot, up the pot, and then it gets a little bit more and more fast, and then all of a sudden it's boiling up top. All of these bubbles are popping, popping, popping. That is what the channel of synthesis does. That's the type of wave that it has. And if that didn't make sense to you, I drew you something here. You can see that, I don't know what color that is, that gray, tan, that color at the bottom is like the bottom of the graph, right? Consistent. And then you'll see that is the wave of the channel of synthesis. So remember I told you like that pot of water, it's bubbling, now it's bubbling up, it's getting hotter, and then it gets up there, it's really boiling, pop. And that is where the answer comes when it comes to this type of emotional wave. All right, so let's recap really quick. Something I want to mention really quickly is that when we're dealing with generators who have an emotional authority, it's a little bit difficult sometimes because it's like, okay, but my sacral's responding, but it's not my authority. I have an emotional authority. Do I have to, like, what's happening there, right? So if you are an emotional authority, or if you're just kind of following along, what I want you to know is that that sacral center is going to respond. no matter what, whether you are a sacral authority or an emotional authority. These are the only authorities that generator types can have. Whether you have this one or that one, that strategy of waiting for a response comes from the sacral, period. So let's tack on this layer of the emotional authority for him. When it comes to making decisions such as, what kind of yogurt do I want? What do I want from DoorDash today? The sacral center can take care of that. The emotional center, we're talking about, should I get married to this person? Should I, sign a paper for a promotion? Do I want to start a business? It's a little bit bigger, because if you think about riding an emotional wave, I hope you're not riding an emotional wave when you're trying to choose yogurt, when you're trying to choose a restaurant. It's going to take you quite a bit. So I hope you can see the difference between the sacral response versus where the emotional authority comes into play. So next, we're going to talk about his incarnation cross. So it could be the cross of shock or the cross of Clarion. I have no idea. No one really knows, because we don't have his exact birth time. However, if you look at what I boxed in, those purple boxes in this, regardless of what incarnation cross he has, those those numbers 51, 57, 61, 62 that you see on this, they do not change. A little decimal point, we call it a line, those change, which is why we don't know his profile, but the actual 51, 57, 61, 62 does not change, which is why I can talk about his incarnation cross. Also, it's my specialty. When we're talking about this incarnation cross, we're talking about shock versus Clarion. It's pretty much the same thing. What the difference is that the cross of shock is very much the essence of shock. It's like you understand shock for yourself, you're translating shock for other people. It's like this two-way street. But if Nas X is a cross of Clarion, it is straight up translation. It is, I am shock, and then everyone who interacts with me or wants my guidance, they're going to feel shock. They're going to be shocked into understanding that their boyfriend's toxic. They're going to be shocked into realizing you should go after that business that you wanted to do. Who knows? It's just this element of shock everywhere that he goes. When I use the word shock, I don't mean cross of shock specifically. I'm saying that both the cross of shock and the cross of Clarion are both about shock. It's just the difference between, you and I are shocking each other, which is cross of shock, versus cross of Clarion, which is I am shocking you. You are receiving my shock. I hope that makes sense. So regardless of which incarnation cross he has, whatever he's doing is all about shock. We can't talk about Nas X without people saying like, oh, it's just like he does these things for shock value. This is how he hypes himself up. It is all a gimmick. Whether it is or not, who knows? He knows, or maybe he doesn't know. So as a human design reader, from my opinion, I think it's legit. That's the root of where it is. Does it mean that he's just breathing and then it's just like all of this is happening, there's no marketing involved? Probably not. But what I'm saying is there is a core in there. There is a core that surrounds the idea of shock. And because this is his incarnation cross, this is the common theme no matter what he is doing in life. Other people will always be a little bit taken aback, for better, for worse. Honestly, from my POV, I always say what our energy as human design, as people, if you have the cross of shock and you feel like people are constantly uneasy around you, it might be how you're expressing shock. It doesn't mean that that's the only way you do it. It doesn't mean that you have to push this on other people for you to live in your design. It's just, it is what it is. I always say it's none of my business how other people perceive it, but I can't get too much into that right now because I'm doing a YouTube video. This is one of the mystical channels in human design. So if you've got this in your chart, congratulations, you have a mystical channel. And this is a mystical channel that takes place through touch, and it can really be any sort of touch. For example, let's say your partner has a channel of synthesis and they're super pissed at you and you want to have a conversation. So you put your hands on their shoulder and bam, there's the pop, bam. Now they've received all of this information about you. So once this happens, it's really taking in the other person through that sense of touch. Those bubbles are popping. Now, this channel is interesting because it is called a projected channel, and projectors are a type in human design and they need to wait for invitation. So now we've got a generator who's got something in his chart that feels like a projector. So generators, if you're out there like, I know I'm a generator, but I've read up about projectors and I feel like a projector too, you've probably got something in your chart about that. You know, there's generated channels, there's, manifested channels. All that's for another day. There's a lot happening there. So projected channels need to be invited. A projector, we have these piercing, sharp auras. We need consent before we can really do our thing, before we can do the work. And just humor me for a second. Imagine me chasing you down. Honestly, just pretend this is a tattoo needle and I'm just chasing you down. I'm just like, let me ink you, please. And you're going to turn around and you're going to be like, I'm going to beat your ass, or you're going to run away because there's a mad woman chasing you with a needle, right? You haven't invited me to do the piercing work of a projector. I'm just using a simplified analogy here. But let's say you come up to me and you're like, I want you specifically to ink me. And I start tattooing with consent. Is it still going to be uncomfortable? Does it still kind of suck and burn the way, something piercing would do? Absolutely. But the consent is there. And that's what we're looking for. And that's what the channel of synthesis is also about. So when we're talking about touch, it's also about consent. It's consenting to give someone information about you. So for Nas X to have a channel of synthesis, when people just put away their walls, their vulnerabilities, he is able to see them, whether it's just by grazing a finger, whether they're like hugging, whatever it is, putting his hand on their shoulder. Like I said, whatever it is, it gives all of this information, these pops of information about them. All right, last one we're going to talk about. I don't have an image of this because you see it when you generate your human design chart. We're going to talk about his environment, which is Shores Artificial, and I love this so much. This is probably my favorite piece of his chart. I don't know what environment means through the context of human design. Here's a simplified explanation. So there's a way you eat that is noted in human design, and this is called your determination or your digestion. It nourishes this physical body. And then there's a place where you chill, where like things don't feel great, and it's like your safe space. That is your environment. You are nourishing, I call it like nourishing your mental health, your energy levels, but that's a simplified version of talking about environment. But anyway, we're talking about Nas X's Shores Artificial, and Shores Artificial is all about man-made transitional spaces, whether it is literal or figurative. He won't find his home in one place necessarily. He is a transitional figure, and I can't put this in this video because I don't understand how copyright on YouTube works, and I don't want to re-record this. But if you look on that blog post I linked below, I do have GIFs that kind of give you a visual of what I'm talking about. But if you watch Call Me By Your Name, that pole there's so many things. The fall, like Lucifer falling from the sky, whatever, the elements of like Adam and Eve, and of course that infamous pole dancing from up there, the human world, from heaven, all that love and light stuff, and then pole dancing down onto the devil's lap. Like, if that's not a transition, like I don't know what is. And if you watch Old Town Road, that whole video is just a giant transition. Like, he's riding a horse and then he's in a car, and I can't even explain it. Just go watch the video if you want to really absorb that essence of what is a Shores Artificial type of thing. And don't forget, when I'm talking about more figurative man-made spaces, we're also talking about gender. We're talking about gender roles. We're talking about sin and holiness based on human perception and judgments of another person. These are man-made things. which is why I love his music videos even more. Those concepts of what he should look like as a man, who is he supposed to be, how should his voice be like, how should he present himself? These are all man-made, and you can see in his work, in his art, he's constantly just jumping between. It's like he makes his own shore. It's whatever he wants it to be, or rather whatever feels right for him in these moments, in these different parts of his life, these different parts of who he is. And I always want to remind people, when we're looking at a human design chart, when we're looking at this, like, forget that we're looking at Nas X's chart. When you're looking at what's in my screen, that's just the raw, doesn't give a crap about anything. It's just a chart. It doesn't matter. It's about how someone expresses the chart, and it's completely automatic. You don't think about these things. It just happens because human design is your blueprint. You're literally living in your blueprints, and the way you do something is your way of expressing it. So the way he expresses shores artificial might not be how another person does, but it is the beauty of seeing a human being embodying and just be in that chart, to live in their design, probably not even knowing about human design. I always say the people that are the purest when it comes to human design are people who don't even know it exists, because they can't like mentally trick themselves to be like, oh, well, I have the cross of shock, so I should be more abrasive, or I should just say all these things and stir the pot all the time, versus someone who's just like, I don't know why I always stir the pot, but it is what it is. So that's why I'm just like, if he doesn't know about human design, even better. I just love seeing it in his art, in his work, even when it's considered controversial, especially when it's considered controversial. So to sum it up, let's recap Nas X's human design. So he is an emotional generator type and authority with the channel of synthesis. It lets the sacral center respond while the emotional wave bubbles to a pop. If nothing else, just screenshot this. If you have the channel of synthesis, just screenshot this and put it somewhere. So next time you're like, what does riding the emotional wave mean? You just remember, pop, boiling pot of water. All right, next, we talked about gate 51 in terms of his incarnation cross. This is the gate of shock. So of course, the incarnation crosses that come out of it are variations of shock. And this reveals that his life's purpose includes shocking people, not because he wants to or he tries to. Human design is automatic, like I noted. Even if he doesn't shock people with his wild music videos and tweets, he's going to shock people because he breathes a certain type of way. It is what it is. And the last thing, shore is artificial. We just talked about it, the transitions between man-made spaces. Even though we don't have Nas X's exact date of birth, we can work with his strategy and authority as a basis for his human design. This is a person who lives between worlds, who walks between ideologies, and the key to his success is doing his thing without taming that shock factor in his work. Because when someone resists their human design, the design finds another way to be expressed. Like a generator who forces themselves to do something that doesn't have a sacral yes might feel locked out of their sacral flow. You know, the gas station's out of order. In Nas X's case, his shock factor can manifest in so many different ways. It doesn't have to be this extravagant music video, but it can be. It can be his tweets that people go wild for. And that aside, it's the fact that he is alive and that he exists. He doesn't need to say a single word. His life is the only thing that gives his chart any meaning. And we end that with saying that this is meaningful to the communities that he represents. And there are some examples of that I found on Reddit in the blog post as well. Thanks for watching. I do have a few links once again at the bottom of this post if you'd like to connect on other platforms. Otherwise, have a good one.